She told me, "Open relationships are normal. Don't be insecure." I quietly backed up the proof, let her have her freedom, and moved out without a fight. Months later, the silence I left behind broke her more than any confrontation could have done. I, 35M, dated L, 32F, for just under 3 years. We met at a friend's housewarming party. She was outgoing, the type who could turn a room of strangers into a comedy show. I'm quieter, more methodical. An engineer by trade, I like structure, routines, planning, details. She liked spontaneity, Instagram stories, new bars every weekend. Somehow the contrast worked. The beginning was great. Weekend trips, cooking together, late nights watching trashy TV while she braided my hair. Yes, I've got long hair. She said it was therapeutic. I remember thinking, this is the first time I've dated someone who makes ordinary life feel fun. The first red flag, which I brushed off, came about a year in. We were at dinner with some of her friends when the conversation drifted to relationships. One of them casually said she and her boyfriend were not exclusive, but totally fine with it. Elle perked up, eyes sparkling, and said, "Honestly, monogamy is so outdated. People should stop being insecure about open dynamics." I remember laughing it off at the time, saying, "Well, works for some, not for me." She smirked, but dropped it. I filed it as just dinner talk. Another red flag. She lived on her phone. Work DMs, group chats, Instagram comments. She was always tapped in. When I'd ask who she was texting at 1 a.m., she'd grin. "Relax, you sound like a jealous husband. It's just memes." She framed everything as a test of whether I was secure. If I questioned something, it wasn't about her transparency, it was about my supposed insecurity. Looking back, that was manipulation 101. At the time, I thought I was being progressive and easygoing. The real unraveling began in year 2. She started throwing around phrases like, "We should normalize open relationships," or "Jealousy is just fear of abandonment," or "You know I love you, but attraction to other people is natural." I'd listen, uncomfortable, but I kept it rational. "I'm not into open dynamics. If that's something you want, we might not be compatible." She'd roll her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. I'm just talking hypotheticals." Except, hypotheticals have a way of creeping into reality. 6 months ago, she left her laptop open while showering. Normally, I don't snoop. I respect privacy, to a fault, probably. But the screen lit up with a messenger notification, and the preview text stopped me cold. "Last night was amazing. Wish we could do it again, without sneaking." I stared at it, frozen. My rational brain flipped on instantly. Instead of storming in, I did what I do best, documented. Screenshots, timestamps, copied the message threads to a USB. Not just that one message, but weeks' worth of conversations with 2 different guys. Flirtation, meetups, explicit exchanges. The kicker? One thread literally had her writing, "He is so sweet, but he's kind of vanilla. He doesn't get that open relationships are normal now. I'm just easing him into it." Reading that, I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange, icy calm. Like the moment in a lab experiment where the data proves what you suspected all along. I didn't confront her immediately. I didn't tip my hand. Instead, I spent 2 weeks quietly preparing. Signed a lease on a small one-bedroom closer to work, moved non-essential stuff slowly. Gym gear, books, spare clothes. Kept every shred of digital evidence in 3 backups. During those weeks, she kept up the act. Cuddling on the couch, posting couple selfies with captions like, "My rock red heart." The dissonance was almost surreal. Then, one Friday morning, while she was at work, I finished the move. Packed the essentials, left the apartment spotless, placed my key on the counter. I left a single note. "You said open relationships are normal. Consider yourself free. Take care." And I walked out. No fight, no shouting, no tears, just absence. She didn't realize for hours. Around 9 p.m., my phone blew up with calls. Then texts. "Where are you? This isn't funny. Why would you just leave like that? We can talk about this." By the next morning, the tone shifted. "You misunderstood. It wasn't serious. They don't mean anything to me. Please don't throw this away over a mistake." I ignored them all. 2 days later, one final message. "Fine. Have your little freedom. You'll regret it when you realize no one else will care for you like I did." The irony didn't even sting. Because 3 weeks later, mutual friends told me she was in meltdown mode. Turns out none of her options were interested in anything serious. What was intoxicating in secret looked a lot less glamorous in daylight. And me? I was already gone. After I moved out, the silence became its own kind of weapon. I didn't plan it that way, but I realized quickly how much power there was in not reacting. Every message she sent, from guilt to rage to bargaining, came through like a script of someone cycling through panic. I watched it happen without ever typing a word back. At first, her friends reached out. Mutual ones, mostly. Hey, Elle's really worried. Can you at least talk to her? Or, I think she deserves closure, man. I didn't tell them what I knew. I didn't show them the screenshots. I didn't want to drag anyone into it. My answer was the same. I'm fine. I just need space. That drove her nuts, apparently, because within a week she started shifting the narrative herself. A buddy from work who sometimes joined us at trivia night sent me a screenshot of her Instagram story. A black background with white text that read, "Imagine being so insecure you throw away something real over rumors. Weak men project their fears instead of growing up." Then a crying selfie. Then another story where she reposted some quote about relationships failing when one partner is too scared of love's freedom. I won't lie, my first reaction was embarrassment. I could imagine our wider circle seeing that and wondering if I was the paranoid guy she was painting me as. But embarrassment turned into a kind of calm resolve. Because I knew the truth, and the truth had timestamps, IP addresses, backup copies in 3 different places. If it ever came down to defending myself, I had more than enough. 2 weeks later, she escalated. She emailed me, the first time she'd used something other than text or social media. The tone was performative. "I'm giving you one last chance to be mature. Our relationship deserves more than a childish exit. If you really loved me, you'd work on your issues instead of running." People don't just walk away from almost 3 years unless they're scared. I drafted 3 different replies and deleted them all. The temptation to attach a PDF with all the screenshots was strong, but I didn't send anything. In the end, I replied with one sentence: "I've made my decision." The more I withheld, the more desperate she became. Friends who initially took her side began telling me, quietly, that she was showing up drunk at their apartments, crying about how she lost the safest person she'd ever had. One even admitted she had tried to kiss him after too many drinks, saying something like, "Don't you wish you had someone who really sees you?" He pushed her away and called me the next morning, half apologetic for not speaking up sooner about her patterns. That was the first time I realized how wide the cracks in her life already were. Around the same time, my landlord from the old place emailed to say Elle had been back at the apartment, demanding to know where I'd moved. She told him I owed her money and she needed to find me. He didn't believe her. She came off erratic, but he warned me in case she tried something legal. That's when I decided to take extra precautions. I spoke to a lawyer friend, explained the situation, and he advised me to keep everything archived, just in case she tried to file some bogus claim. "The best thing you've done is keep everything non-confrontational and documented," he said. That reassurance mattered more than I expected. The real kicker came about a month after I left. She called me from an unknown number, and against my better judgment I answered. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Please, can we meet? Just for coffee. I need to explain." I told her calmly that there was nothing left to explain. She started crying, begging, promising she'd cut everyone else off if I just gave her another chance. And for the first time, I felt something close to pity. Not love, not longing, just pity for someone who built their world on illusions and couldn't believe it collapsed when the foundation disappeared. I told her I wished her well, but my answer wasn't changing. I hung up. After that, she finally went quiet. The story stopped. The messages slowed. Mutual friends reported she'd gone radio silent, on most of them too. Rumor was, one of the guys she'd been seeing blocked her after she asked if he wanted something more serious. Another apparently told her flat out he never considered her anything more than fun on the side. Meanwhile, my life felt strangely light. The new apartment was smaller, yes, but it felt like mine. No lingering energy of distrust. No waiting for the other shoe to drop. I started running more, cooking again, even picked up an old hobby I'd abandoned years ago, repairing vintage cameras. I could finally hear my own thoughts without someone else telling me which of them were secure or insecure. But freedom doesn't mean you walk away untouched. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, heart racing, replaying all the little moments I'd ignored. The way she'd smirk when she called me jealous. The way she'd change the subject when I asked where she'd been. It wasn't grief for her. It was grief for the version of myself that accepted so many half-truths just to avoid conflict. That realization stung more than her betrayal. By the end of the second month, I knew she would try again. Not necessarily to win me back, but to rewrite the story so she wasn't the villain. And I braced myself for that. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence unsettles people more than any fight ever could. Update 1. About 2.5 months after I moved out, the update I had been half expecting finally arrived. It didn't come directly from her this time. It came through the social grapevine, the same way so many things travel in our generation. A carefully curated social media post. One night I got a text from a college friend with a screenshot. Elle had posted a long caption under a picture of herself sitting by a window, coffee cup in hand, staged like a lifestyle magazine spread. The caption read something along the lines of, "It's taken me time to heal from the sudden abandonment I went through." Some people run from love because they're scared of its intensity. I've always been too honest, too raw, too unfiltered, and that's intimidating. But I won't apologize for wanting freedom and connection. If that makes me unlovable to some, that's their loss. The comments under it were exactly what she wanted. Her friends telling her she was brave, real, so inspiring. A few even wrote, "His loss." Reading it didn't even make me angry. It made me feel like I was reading a stranger's diary written for an audience. It confirmed something I already knew. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about her needing to control the narrative. Still, I couldn't help but think about how people who didn't know the full story, the screenshots, the weeks of manipulation, the way she framed my boundaries as insecurity, would assume I had simply run away because I couldn't handle a strong woman. That gnawed at me for a few hours. But the feeling passed because the difference was I had nothing to prove. Not long after that post, I started getting messages from people I hadn't heard from in ages. A girl I dated very briefly years ago sent a DM saying, "Wow, I just saw Elle's post. Did you really ghost her after 3 years?" It hit me then that silence may protect me legally, but it also leaves a vacuum that others fill with their own assumptions. I typed out a long explanation, then deleted it, and settled for, "We broke up." It wasn't working. That was it. I didn't know the internet a defense. Then came the escalation I had been bracing for. She showed up outside my new apartment. I recognized her car before I saw her, parked halfway down the block. When I came back from a run, she was leaning against the hood. She smiled like nothing had happened and said, "Hey, stranger. Thought maybe we could actually talk, face to face." I didn't take the bait. I told her calmly that showing up uninvited was not okay. She tried to push past it with small talk, asking if I'd been seeing anyone, if I missed our mornings together. I repeated myself, "You need to leave." She finally did, but not before saying, "You'll never find someone who knew you like I did. You're just punishing yourself." That night, I wrote everything down in detail. Time, place, what was said. I added it to the file with the screenshots and saved it. My lawyer friend had been right. Documenting wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. Sure enough, a week later I got a text from a mutual friend saying Elle had told people she went to see me for closure and that I had been cold and cruel to her. At that point, I realized she wasn't going to stop reframing things until everyone either agreed with her version or stopped listening. That thought used to exhaust me. Now it just clarified my strategy. No engagement, no reaction, only records. And here's the twist I didn't expect. My silence started flipping people's perceptions. At first, they believed her. But as weeks went by and she continued posting vague quotes and tearful selfies, while I quietly went about my life, working, running, showing up to trivia nights, smiling, some friends began to put the pieces together. One pulled me aside and said, "I don't need details. I can tell she's spinning something. You don't have to explain." That single line felt more validating than any confrontation ever could. The irony is, her own desperation started to unravel her narrative. When none of her options wanted something real, when her story stopped getting the flood of supportive comments, when people got tired of hearing the same, "I'm too honest for love" speech, that's when the cracks showed. I didn't need to expose her. She exposed herself. By the end of month 3, she had all but disappeared from our circles. No more long captions, no more inspirational quotes about freedom. A mutual told me she was laying low. apparently working with a therapist. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's just another version of the story. For me, the update is simple. I've learned the hardest thing is resisting the urge to prove your side. Silence isn't weakness, it's a decision. And in my case, it was the only thing that gave me back my peace. Final update. It's been just over a year since I walked out of that apartment and left the note on the counter. Time has this strange way of stretching and compressing. Some days it feels like it all happened yesterday. Other days it feels like another lifetime. The first few months after the dust settled, I expected to feel triumphant. Like I had outsmarted a trap, escaped a fire before it consumed me. Instead, what I mostly felt was emptiness. Not because I missed her, I didn't, but because I realized how much energy I had spent negotiating with myself, softening my boundaries, rationalizing away the unease. You can't get that time back, and when it hits you, it's heavy. I thought a lot about silence. People talk about it like it's passive, like you're doing nothing. But I learned it's actually the hardest form of action. To not explain yourself, to not dump your proof, to not clear your name. That takes more control than any screaming match ever could. There were nights when I lay awake rehearsing imaginary conversations where I finally told everyone the truth, only to remind myself that the people who mattered already knew, and the ones who didn't weren't owed an explanation. I kept running, kept working, kept fixing old cameras. That hobby became almost symbolic for me, taking something broken, cleaning it, making it functional again. Except with myself, there wasn't a clear set of steps. No manual, just patience. By the 6-month mark, I started dating again. Carefully, cautiously. Nothing serious at first, just coffees, long walks, conversations. I paid attention to things I used to brush off. How people talked about their exes, how they handled disagreements, whether they listened when I spoke. And, more importantly, how I listened to my own instincts. That hypervigilance sometimes made me feel paranoid, but it also felt like finally trusting myself again. Somewhere around month 9, I learned through a mutual acquaintance that Elle had moved to another city. She had apparently quit her job, said she needed a fresh start. There were whispers she'd been burned by one of the men she had lined up as her option. He'd promised her something serious, then ghosted her. Part of me thought, poetic justice. Another part thought, no, just human mess repeating itself. She wasn't a monster. She was someone who wanted the world to bend around her needs and couldn't accept the consequences when it didn't. That doesn't excuse the lies, but it keeps me from mythologizing her as some great villain in my life. The truth is, she'll probably tell our story in a way that makes her the one who was wronged, forever. And maybe some people will believe her. That used to bother me. Now it doesn't. Because I realized something that sounds simple but took me a year to absorb. Other people's perception of me doesn't change who I am when I wake up in the morning. What I know, the facts, the screenshots, the memories, the quiet dignity of leaving without a scene, that's enough. I still get moments of doubt. Not about her, but about myself. Did I waste 3 years? Should I have noticed sooner? Should I have been less calm, more explosive, so she couldn't twist the story? Those thoughts creep in, usually late at night. But I remind myself, maybe the real growth wasn't about catching her or punishing her, but about learning not to abandon myself in the process of loving someone else. In the end, the freedom she demanded left her more trapped than me, and the silence I chose gave me more space than I'd ever had. These days, I've rebuilt a life that feels solid. My apartment is still small, but it's a home. I have friends who trust me because I didn't drag them into drama, and that's worth more than a perfect public image. I've let one relationship grow into something steadier, with a woman who doesn't use words like insecure as weapons. We talk about everything, even the ugly stuff, and it feels like the antidote to everything before. The lesson I carry isn't neat or cinematic. It's not karma got her or justice was served. It's that truth is heavier than it looks. Carrying it quietly, without needing to hurl it like a weapon, takes strength. And strength, I've learned, doesn't always look like winning an argument. Sometimes it looks like walking out of an apartment with nothing but your essentials, leaving a key and a note behind, and never looking back. That's how it ended for me. Not with fireworks or revenge, but with silence that echoed louder than any words either of us could have said. And if there's any advice I'd give someone reading this, wondering whether to confront or to leave, it would be this. Listen to yourself the first time you feel the unease. Because ignoring it only delays the inevitable, And the truth, when it arrives, doesn't care about timing. It just demands to be carried.